The TEV Wahine was a turbo-electric, roll-on, roll-off passenger ferry sailing passengers across New Zealand's waters. But on April 10th, 1968, near the end of a routine overnight crossing from Lyttelton, disaster struck. The ship was caught in a fierce storm fueled by tropical Cyclone Giselle. She ran aground on Barrett Reef before drifting, capsizing, and sinking in the shallow waters near Steeple Rock at the mouth of Wellington Harbor. Of the 734 people on board, 53 lost their lives, some to drowning, others to exposure or injuries sustained in the chaotic evacuation. The wreck of Wahine would go down in history as New Zealand's worst modern maritime disaster. Hello everyone, it's Jamie from Old Shipping Lines, and in today's video we'll cover the full story of the TEV Wahine from her construction and early service to her tragic final voyage. The TEV Wahine was designed and constructed for the Union Steamship Company of New Zealand, serving as one of the many ferries connecting New Zealand's North and South Islands. She was built by Fairfield Shipbuilding and Engineering Company in Govan, Glasgow, Scotland. The Union Company initiated plans for her construction in 1961, and her keel was laid on the 14th of September 1964 under hull number 830. Now, if we discuss the specifics of this vessel, her gross tonnage would be 8,948 gross registered tons. The vessel measured 488 feet in length, and she had a beam of 71 feet. At the time, the Wahine was the largest ship in the Union Company's fleet and ranked among the world's largest passenger ferries. Her power plant featured a turbo-electric transmission system with 4 boilers generating steam for 2 turbo alternators that powered the twin main propellers, enabling a top speed of 22 knots. The vessel was also equipped with stern and bow thruster propellers, allowing for easier sideways maneuvering during berthing. Additionally, stabilizers were installed to reduce both the frequency and intensity of rolling. The hull was segmented by 13 watertight bulkheads, creating 14 watertight compartments. For lifeboat provisions, there were 8 large fiberglass motor lifeboats, each 26 feet in length with a capacity for 50 people. In addition, there were 6 standard lifeboats, each measuring 31 feet and capable of holding 99 people. The vessel also carried 36 inflatable rafts, each able to accommodate 25 people. Her steel hull was completed in 10 months, and she was christened and launched on the 14th of July 1965 by the wife of the Union Company's director. Over the next few months, Wahine's machinery, cargo holds, and passenger facilities were installed, with the ship being fully completed by June 1966. She set sail from Greenock, Scotland on the 18th of June 1966 and arrived in Wellington, New Zealand on the 24th of July 1966. The Wahine began service on the 1st of August 1966 with her maiden voyage from Wellington taking over from the Hinemoa. By the end of the year, she had completed 67 crossings to Lyttelton from August 1966 onwards. The Wahine and TEV Maori provided a regular 2-ship overnight service between Wellington and Lyttelton, with 1 ship departing each port each night for a crossing. The introduction of Wahine allowed TEV Wahine to be withdrawn from service and later sold. On a typical crossing, Wahine's crew consisted of 126 members. In the deck department, the team included the master, 3 officers, 1 radio operator, and 19 sailors who oversaw the overall operation. The engine department had 8 engineers, 2 electricians, 1 donkeyman, and 12 general workers responsible for running the engines. In the victualling department, 60 stewards, 7 stewardesses, 5 cooks, and 4 pursers attended to the passengers' needs. On daytime voyages, the Wahine could accommodate 1,100 passengers, while on overnight crossings, the capacity was 927. The ship featured over 300 cabins, including single, double, triple, and 4 berth options, along with 2 dormitory-style cabins that each housed 12 passengers. Common areas included a cafeteria, lounge, smoke room, gift shop, 2 enclosed promenades, and open decks. Wahine also had 2 vehicle decks, with a combined capacity for more than 200 cars. On the evening of the 9th of April 1968, the Wahine set off from Littleton for a routine overnight crossing to Wellington with 610 passengers and 123 crew on board. In the early hours of the 10th of April, 2 powerful storms merged over Wellington, forming a single extratropical cyclone, the most intense ever recorded in New Zealand's history. Cyclone Giselle, which had already caused significant damage in the North Island, was heading south, meeting another storm that had traveled up the west coast of the South Island from Antarctica. The combined forces of the storms brought the strongest winds ever recorded in Wellington, reaching speeds of 275 kilometers per hour. In one suburb, the wind tore the roofs off 98 houses, and 3 ambulances and a truck were overturned as they tried to reach the area to assist injured people. As the storms battered Wellington Harbor, the Wahine was on the final leg of her voyage heading out of Cook Strait. Although weather warnings had been issued before her departure from Littleton, there was no indication that the storms would escalate to such severity. Nor were they expected to be any worse than the typical conditions encountered when crossing Cook Strait. At 5:50, with wind gusts between 100 and 150 kilometers per hour, Captain Hector Gordon Robertson decided to enter the harbor. However, just 20 minutes later, the winds intensified to 160 kilometers per hour, and Wahine's radar failed. A massive wave forced the ship off course and toward Barrett Reef. Despite Robertson's efforts to correct the ship's path, he was unable to do so and opted to continue turning, attempting to head back out to sea. For 30 minutes, the Wahine fought against the waves and wind, but by 6:10, the ship stopped responding to the helm and the engines failed. At 6:40, she was driven onto the southern tip of Barrett Reef, just under a mile from shore, near the harbor entrance. As the ship drifted along the reef, she lost her starboard propeller and suffered a significant hole in her hull on the starboard side of the stern, below the waterline. Passengers were informed that the ferry was aground, but assured there was no immediate danger. They were instructed to put on their life jackets and head to their muster stations as a precautionary measure. The storm grew even more intense, with winds exceeding 250 kilometers per hour. The Wahine dragged her anchors and drifted into the harbor. By around 11 o'clock, near the western shore at Siatun, the anchors finally held. Around the same time, the tug Tapuhi reached the Wahine and attempted to secure a line, but the line snapped after just 10 minutes. Further attempts to establish a tow were unsuccessful, but Deputy Harbor Master Captain Galloway managed to board the Wahine from the pilot boat. As the morning progressed, the threat of the ship sinking seemed to diminish. The vessel was in an area where the water depth did not exceed 10 meters, and the crew expected the worst-case scenario to be a cleanup. Once the Wahine either reached Wellington or grounded in shallower water, there was even hope that she could resume service that evening, albeit later than scheduled, once repairs were made to the damage caused by the reef. At around 1:15 p.m., the combined force of the tide and storm swung the Wahine around, briefly creating a patch of calmer water sheltered from the wind. However, as the ship suddenly listed further and reached the point of no return, Captain Robertson gave the order to abandon ship. Similar to the sinking of the Italian liner, the Andrea Doria off the New England coast in 1956, the Wahine developed a severe starboard list, rendering the 4 port-side lifeboats unusable. Only the 4 on the starboard side could be launched. The first, motor lifeboat S1, capsized shortly after being lowered, throwing its occupants into the turbulent sea. Many drowned, including 2 children and several elderly passengers. One of the survivors, Shirley Hick, later recalled the tragedy vividly. She lost 2 of her 3 children, including her 3-year-old daughter, Alma, who drowned when the lifeboat overturned. Some passengers managed to cling to the upturned boat as it drifted across the harbor toward the eastern shore near Eastbourne. The 3 remaining standard lifeboats, though reportedly overcrowded by several survivors, successfully reached shore. Lifeboat S2, carrying around 70 passengers and crew, landed on Seatoon Beach on the western side of the channel, followed by Lifeboat S4, which was dangerously packed with over 100 people. Meanwhile, the heavily overloaded Lifeboat S3 drifted across the channel, eventually coming ashore near Eastbourne, approximately 5 kilometers away on the opposite side. The Wahine deployed her life rafts, but towering waves up to 6 meters high overturned several of them, resulting in many fatalities. She sank in 11.6 meters of water, forcing hundreds of passengers and crew into the rough sea. As the weather cleared, the sight of the Wahine foundering in the harbor triggered a swift response from nearby vessels. The ferry GMV Aramoana, along with tugs, fishing boats, yachts, and small personal craft, rushed to the scene, rescuing hundreds of survivors. More than 200 passengers and crew reached the rocky shoreline on the eastern side of the channel, south of Eastbourne. However, this remote and unpopulated area left many stranded and exposed to the elements for hours. While rescue teams struggled to navigate the rough gravel road along the coast, several bodies were recovered from this location. At approximately 2:30 p.m., the Wahine completely rolled onto her starboard side. Some survivors managed to reach shore, only to perish from exhaustion or exposure. The disaster claimed 51 lives on that day, with 2 more succumbing to their injuries later, bringing the total death toll to 53. While most of the victims were middle-aged or elderly, 3 children were also among the lost. The causes of death ranged from drowning and exposure to injuries sustained against the rocks. A total of 566 passengers and 110 crew members survived. Rescuers recovered 46 bodies, while 6 people remained missing. 10 weeks after the disaster, a court of inquiry determined that errors in judgment had been made, but emphasized the extreme and hazardous conditions at the time. The primary cause of Wahine's capsizing was the free surface effect, as water accumulated on the vehicle deck, destabilizing the ship. However, some expert advisors to the inquiry believed she had run aground a second time, allowing additional water to flood the lower decks. The inquiry report concluded that if the order to abandon ship had been issued either earlier or later, more lives would likely have been lost. The storm was so severe that rescue vessels wouldn't have been able to assist passengers before midday. Although charges were filed against the officers of the Wahine, all were ultimately acquitted. Early attempts to salvage the ship were abandoned when the full extent of her structural damage became apparent, given that the wreck posed a navigational threat. Efforts were made over the next year to refloat her and tow her into Cook Strait for scuttling. However, a storm in 1969 caused the wreck to break apart, and she was eventually dismantled, partly using the Hekitia floating crane. Wahine's tragic final voyage remains one of New Zealand's most devastating maritime disasters. The strength of the storm, the series of misfortunes, and the decisions made in those harrowing moments all contributed to the loss of 53 lives. While the ship may have been a technological marvel in its time, the disaster serves as a stark reminder of the unpredictable power of nature. Though the wreck was eventually dismantled, the memories of the Wahine and her passengers continue to live on, ensuring that her story is never forgotten.
And that marks the end of a video, my friends. Thank you all so very much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Now, if you liked what you saw, please consider subscribing to the channel, as that would help out the channel a lot. Now, if you have any thoughts, comments or questions, please leave them in the comment section down below, as I absolutely love reading your comments. And please let me know in the comment section down below as well what ships you would like me to cover in the future. Now be as well sure to check out our social media pages. We are on Twitter, we are on Instagram, and we also recently have a website, oldshippinglines.com, where we have articles of the ships we cover and we have book reviews as well. I think you will enjoy the website very much. Now, with that out of the way, guys, I wish you all a good night or day, wherever you are. Stay safe, stay happy, and we will see each other on the next video. Goodbye, my friends.